This is Duke University.
In 1864, in Washington County, Indiana, white residents made a very simple proposal to the black community: leave or die. In 1886, a mob of 500 whites in Comanche County, Texas, lynched a black teenager and then forced every black out of the county. In 1901, in Pierce City, Missouri, after the death of a white woman, a black man was hung and 2 others burned in their homes. Then, at gunpoint, the remaining blacks were told to leave town. In 1905 and 1909, Harrison, Arkansas's white citizens expelled their African-American neighbors in 2 waves of terror. And in Forsyth County, Georgia in 1912, black homes were dynamited, forcing more than 1,000 black residents of the county to flee. The pattern is eerily similar: an alleged crime against a white woman, the lynching of a black man, and the expulsion of the black community. The land the blacks left behind was lost forever, leaving a haunting legacy where many of these counties remain virtually all white to this day.
I would rather this become pretty dialogic, so, but I'm curious, Marco, if you don't mind me starting off. You said earlier when we were talking that you hadn't seen this film in a while, and that your recent film was also about people who were fairly invisible, or very invisible. I'm wondering, maybe you could start us off by just a few comments about what it was, just about seeing the film again.
I kind of liked it.
It's always good.
I mean, it is kind of good, I mean, there are a lot of things you look and say, I should have done this, I should have done that, but I actually kind of like that. This is a collective narrative, and ultimately, that if you are willing to sort of acknowledge the presence of African Americans, you kind of acknowledge your own existence, and so in this sense, that's why I think there is an opportunity to, even if you were not born then when such and such happened, to sort of own it, because then it becomes part of who you are.
To what degree do those of us who live today own the history of our foremothers and forefathers? And I can't tell you how many times I've had the argument, oftentimes the very emotional argument, with somebody who says, well, I didn't do that. That was done back then. I didn't do it. So why blame me? For those of us who live in North Carolina, is most amazing is the degree to which we have not even acknowledged our history. All these episodes basically revolve around the events that took place at the same time as the Wilmington Race Riot in 1898. Wilmington Race Riot ended what was one of the most promising moments of biracial democracy that existed in the post-Reconstruction period, when North Carolina had a fusion government with a substantial number of black office holders and white office holders, and moving toward a very different kind of democracy. And at that moment in time, the quote-unquote best white people, the best white people, all those who are supposedly enlightened, well-educated, perceptive people, came together including the editor of the Raw News and Observer, and mobilized a statewide campaign to basically accuse all black men of being trying to rape white women, and incentivized a riot in Wilmington, North Carolina, that essentially was designed to fill the Cape Fear River with black bodies. And was so successful in doing so that the fusion government was destroyed. A white government, totally white government, was created, and in 1901, black voters were disenfranchised, and Jim Crow started in North Carolina. Now, not only did that happen, probably the most important single event in North Carolina's history, but until 5 years ago, the most important college textbook on North Carolina history never mentioned the Wilmington race riot. Now talk about obscuring, destroying, obliterating history. That's a hell of an example.
Elliot Jaspin, a reporter, has been investigating the banishment of blacks in the United States for several years.
When you start to read these things, you're stunned by it. It's so unexpected, the accounts of what took place. It says, Negroes flee from Forsyth. Enraged white people are driving blacks from county. Drive Negroes from Harrison. Negro residents in panic. If Bob Fancher leaves, there will not be a Negro in Boone County. The only conclusion that you can come to after you look at all this is that blacks feared for their lives and they fled the county. The terror was substantial, and they did not have time, in many cases, to sell their land. And after they left, a lot of them were too afraid to come back to try and negotiate any sale of land. So basically, the land is lost.
Was there one place in your research where a county where the greatest number of blacks were expelled?
Yeah, that clearly is Forsyth County, Georgia. There were 1,098 blacks living there in 1912. Within a matter of months, it had dropped to 30. It's the largest racial cleansing in America that I know of. It's also interesting because of this whole land question. It raises the issue of how do we cure the past in a sense? How do we come to terms with this? What do we do?
There's a legacy, there's an identity, there's a sense of belonging, but there is a monetary value, and the loss of land meant that in Forsyth that the Strickland family was not in a position to, let's say, sell land, which is how wealth is bestowed from generation to generation. And then Charles, comments repeatedly that, his people were progressive. They were doctors and lawyers, and imagine them living in the town of Pierce City, which was part of my comment to the mayor, was to point out that in Pierce City was a depraved little town of 1,200 people. And I think that, just looking in this room, and I think many of you might, celebrate and embrace the richness that comes out of diversity. So if they had been willing to invite African Americans to move back into the town, they would have had a tax base. There would have been that many more citizens, and the community would have been that much more, improved in some sense.
So if the primary issue is healing, above and beyond the monetary value that needs to be settled, how do you approach the topic of healing while thinking about acknowledgement and repair?
Repair does not mean healing. It may mean justice, but it does not mean healing. Acknowledgement means at least coming face to face with what has happened. Healing is something very different. Healing is something which, as Barbara was, I think, suggesting, it involves a personal sharing of camaraderie, trust, love, which is different from repair or acknowledgement. think that the only way you get to healing is a very different kind of personal process.
The preferred posture was to be defensive, and I think to misconstrue the notion of reparation. I mean, reparation is not a check. Reparation can be a lot of different things towards repair. And even though it's always makes me smile in watching the film, tonight made me smile that those who have the pocketbook or the wallet are always the first to say that money doesn't solve anything. It's not like they say, well, you know, here's my open bank book, take what you need, and then we'll decide. What is lost is, you know, it's hard to quantify, but it's very, very clear.
Produced by Duke University. Online at duke.edu.